She was just a teenager, quietly sitting in her seat, excited for her flight. But within minutes, a flight attendant stood over her, demanding she move. Loudly, in front of everyone. She was humiliated, treated like she didn't belong. In that crushing moment, every sneer and dismissive glance magnified her isolation, as if the entire cabin were echoing a verdict of unworthiness. Yet behind that harsh rebuke lay a secret no one could foresee. Her father was the powerful owner of the entire airline. In a breathtaking twist that defied every expectation, the tide swiftly turned, leaving the crew and passengers utterly stunned by the unfolding reckoning. Before we start the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new one. She was just a young girl sitting quietly in her seat, her small backpack tucked neatly under the chair in front of her. Boarding the plane alone, Zara Collins clutched her ticket as though it were a precious talisman, her heart pulsating with equal parts excitement and nervous anticipation. This was her inaugural flight without the reassuring presence of her family, a daring step into the unknown that filled her with both pride and a touch of trepidation. Dressed in a modest hoodie and jeans, she exuded a quiet confidence. Her curly hair, carefully gathered into a neat ponytail, framed a determined gaze that spoke of resilience and dreams yet to be fulfilled. As she sank into the plush comfort of her first-class seat, a stark upgrade from the cramped economy rides of her childhood, she allowed herself a moment of introspection, savoring the soft hum of the cabin and the bustling choreography unfolding outside the window. Every detail, from the subtle rustle of pages in the book she had chosen to accompany her, to the gentle rhythm of her favorite music, echoed her deep sense of achievement. A hard-won reward for excelling in school, gifted by her father. Yet, just as the tender glow of accomplishment began to warm her spirit, the moment was abrupt. A flight attendant named Miss Elise walked down the aisle, checking passengers and their seatbelts. She was tall, with sharp features and an even sharper gaze. Her uniform was crisp, and she carried herself with authority, as if she believed she owned the plane. When her eyes landed on Zara Collins, she stopped abruptly, her friendly expression fading into a slight frown. She took a step closer, her tone firm and impatient. "Excuse me, miss. Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Miss Elise's voice was loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, causing a few heads to turn. Zara Collins looked up, surprised. She pulled out her boarding pass from the pocket of her hoodie and handed it to Miss Elise with a polite smile. "Yes, I'm in SE2A." Miss Elise scanned the ticket, her eyes narrowing. She paused, then looked back at Zara Collins with a skeptical expression. "This is a first-class ticket," she said slowly, as if Zara Collins didn't understand. "Are you traveling with someone?" "No, I'm traveling alone," Zara Collins replied, her voice steady but quiet, not expecting to be questioned like this. Miss Elise's lips tightened. She handed the ticket back but didn't move on. Instead, she placed her hands on her hips and leaned slightly forward. "I think there's been a mistake. You can't sit here. This seat is reserved for first-class passengers." Zara Collins' heart skipped a beat. She blinked, confused, but thought, "This is my seat. I have a first-class ticket." The flight attendant's tone grew sharper. "Listen, sweetheart. I don't know how you ended up with this ticket, but you need to move to the back. You're holding up the boarding process." The words stung, not just because of what she said, but how she said it. Loud, dismissive, as if Zara Collins were some kind of problem. Passengers nearby started whispering. Some looked away, pretending not to notice, while others watched with curiosity. The murmur of discontent in the cabin seemed to grow as the tension mounted, filling the narrow aisle with an uncomfortable energy that made every second feel drawn out and heavy. Zara Collins felt her face grow warm, her pride crumbling under the weight of humiliation. She wasn't a troublemaker, and she didn't want to cause a scene, but this wasn't fair. Still, she gathered her things quietly, refusing to let tears fall. She could feel the stares following her as she walked down the aisle toward the economy section, her heart pounding with embarrassment. Miss Elise didn't offer to help. She just stood there, her face set in a smug expression, satisfied that she had corrected the situation. The journey from first class to the back felt like a public shaming, each step echoing with the judgment of unseen eyes and harsh whispers. Zara Collins found an empty seat near the back of the plane. She sat down, her hands trembling slightly as she stuffed her backpack under the seat again. She stared out the small window, fighting back the lump in her throat. She wasn't going to cry. She wouldn't give anyone that satisfaction. After a few minutes, she pulled out her phone and typed a message to her father. "Dad, they made me leave my seat even though I had the ticket. The flight attendant was really rude. I'm in the back now." She hit send, slipped her phone back into her bag, and stared out the window, her face calm, but inside her mind raced with a mix of anger, disbelief, and a resolve that simmered beneath her quiet exterior. She didn't know what would happen next, but something told her this wasn't over. Not even close. Zara Collins sat in the cramped economy seat, gripping the armrest tightly. The soft hum of the engines filled the cabin, yet her mind was overwhelmed by the relentless replay of events that had just unfolded. Every detail, the cold glare of disapproval, the hushed murmurs of nearby passengers, seemed etched into her memory. She knew she had done nothing wrong. She had her ticket, she had followed every rule, and yet she was made to feel like an unwelcome intruder. Frustration churned in her stomach, but she summoned the inner calm her father had always urged her to embrace, insisting that patience and control trumped the fleeting fire of anger. In that moment of quiet resolve, her phone vibrated in her lap, jolting her back to the present. Quickly, she unlocked the screen and saw her father's message flash. "What do you mean they made you move?" After a brief pause filled with uncertainty, she carefully typed back, recounting in simple words, "I couldn't sit in first class and they made me move to the back." Moments later, his next message arrived. "What's the flight number?" Zara's heart began to beat faster as she recognized that even through text, his tone carried a storm of anger carefully veiled behind measured words. Anger he never allowed to show outright. He was not the type to shout or lose his temper. Instead, he always managed matters with a quiet authority that commanded respect. Instantly, she double-checked her boarding pass and sent him the flight number along with a reassuring directive. "Stay where you are. Don't worry about anything." Although she exhaled slowly and placed her phone down with a forced calm, a storm of uncertainty brewed inside her. She trusted her father implicitly, yet she wondered what measures he could possibly take now that the plane was already soaring through the skies, and Miss Elise had made it abundantly clear that her presence in first class was unacceptable. Meanwhile, at the front of the plane, Miss Elise strode confidently back to the galley, evidently pleased with her own decisive actions. She poured herself a quick cup of coffee, dismissing the sidelong glances and murmured comments from the other flight attendants. One of them, a younger woman named Iris, paused before speaking. In a cautious tone, "Was there really an issue with that girl's ticket?" she asked. Miss Elise rolled her eyes. "You saw her, didn't you? She didn't look like a first-class passenger, probably a mistake in the system, or maybe she got the ticket from someone else." Either way, I wasn't about to let her sit up here when she clearly didn't belong. Iris frowned but said nothing. She knew better than to argue with Miss Elise, who had been with the airline for years and had a reputation for being strict, but something about the situation didn't sit right with her. Back in the main cabin, Zara Collins sat quietly, staring at the seatbelt sign. Deep in thought, she couldn't shake the unsettling intuition that her father's next move would be as dramatic as the error just committed by the flight attendant. Miss Elise, meanwhile, moved briskly through the first-class cabin, meticulously straightening trays and offering drinks, her demeanor cool and unruffled, as if the earlier incident were nothing more than routine. To her, it was simply another instance of enforcing the rules, a minor correction for a passenger who didn't quite fit the expected profile. Yet beneath her practiced efficiency, a faint twinge of doubt stirred, hinting that perhaps this time her judgment might have been flawed. As she refilled a passenger's glass with deliberate care, the intercom suddenly crackled to life. "Miss Elise, please report to the cockpit immediately." Her hand froze momentarily before she quickly set the bottle down, glancing around at a cabin that seemed indifferent to the interruption. With a composed smile masking her inner uncertainty, she straightened her uniform and began a measured walk toward the front. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The captain turned to look at her with a serious expression, and on the in-flight phone screen, a flight manager from the executive office appeared, his face unreadable but his tone firm. "Miss Elise, we've received a call from the executive office. There's a situation on board that requires clarification. A first-class passenger was removed from her seat. Can you explain why?" Miss Elise's confidence wavered slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. "Yes, Captain. A young girl was in first class with a ticket that didn't match her status. I asked her to move to economy." The man on the screen blinked, his expression darkening. "Did you check the validity of her ticket before making her move?" Miss Elise hesitated. "Well, yes, but yes or no?" The manager interrupted. His mouth went dry. "I checked it, but I didn't think." The captain's jaw tightened. "You didn't think what?" Before she could answer, the manager continued in a colder voice. "Now, the girl you removed is Zara Collins. Do you know who her father is?" Miss Elise shook her head slowly, suddenly feeling a strange sense of unease creeping up her spine. "Her father is Ethan Miller," the manager said flatly, "the owner of this airline." The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. Immediately, the shock coursed through her veins as the realization sank in and the color drained from her face. The captain didn't look surprised. He had already been briefed. "We have direct orders from Mr. Miller himself. You will return to Zara Collins, personally apologize in front of the passengers, and escort her back to first class. And when this flight lands, you will be required to explain yourself in front of the executive board." Miss Elise felt her throat tighten. She had humiliated the daughter of the most powerful man in the airline industry, and she had done it in front of a cabin full of passengers. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a career-ending disaster, understood the manager in a voice like ice. Miss Elise swallowed hard and nodded, though her hands trembled as the gravity of her error began to weigh on her. "Good," the captain said. "Now fix your mistake without another word." Miss Elise turned and walked out of the cockpit, her legs feeling strangely weak for the first time in her career. Every step reverberated with the bitter sting of regret as she grappled with the reality that she had lost control of the situation and had no idea what was going to happen next. Stepping into the narrow corridor, her breath came faster than usual and her mind raced with a mix of dread and disbelief. She replayed the incident over and over, questioning every decision that led her here. The heavy silence of the cabin, punctuated by curious stares from passengers who had witnessed her falter, intensified the crushing burden of her mistake. With each step, the sound of her footsteps seemed to echo the magnitude of the error, a misstep that threatened to upend her entire career and reputation. Her thoughts churned relentlessly as she trudged towards the economy section, trying to muster the courage to face the consequences of her actions. She reached the economy section, scanning the rows until she spotted Zara Collins sitting by the window, staring outside, her hands folded in her lap. Clearing her throat, Miss Elise forced a tight smile and crouched slightly to be at eye level. In a lower but still forced tone, she said, "There's been a misunderstanding. I'd like to escort you back to your original seat in first class." Zara Collins turned to look at her, her expression unreadable. She didn't move right away. Ms. Elise's skin prickled under the weight of the silence. She could feel the nearby passengers listening in, waiting to see what would happen next. "I apologize for any inconvenience," Miss Elise added quickly, her voice strained. Zara Collins blinked, then tilted her head slightly. "You're saying it was a misunderstanding?" Ms. Elise nodded stiffly. "Yes, there was." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. An error in seating, the best excuse she could come up with? She couldn't bring herself to admit what really happened. Zara Collins studied her for a long moment before responding, her voice soft but firm. "I had my ticket, you saw it, and you still told me to move." A couple of passengers nearby exchanged looks. They had heard everything earlier and knew Zara Collins was right. Miss Elise swallowed hard. "I may have made a mistake in judgment," she said carefully, "but I'd like to correct it now. Please, come with me." Zara Collins didn't say anything right away. She could feel the weight of the moment. She could get up and return to first class like nothing happened. She could let it go, but why should she? She picked up her phone and tapped out a quick message to her father. "She's asking me to come back now. What should I do?" The reply came almost instantly. "Take your time. Make her understand what she did." Zara Collins slipped the phone back into her bag and looked at Miss Elise again. "I'll go back," she said calmly, "but I want to know why you thought I didn't belong there." Miss Elise stiffened. I didn't think, but you did," she stammered. Zara Collins interrupted, her voice steady, not angry, just firm. "You didn't ask anyone else in first class for their ticket, just me. Why?" Miss Elise opened her mouth, then shut it again. The passengers around them were dead silent, all waiting for her answer. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to being questioned. Zara Collins stood up slowly, keeping her eyes on the flight attendant. "If you're going to apologize, at least tell the truth." Miss Elise's face burned. She had spent years controlling situations like this, making the rules, keeping things in order. But now she wasn't in control at all. She had never expected a teenager to hold this much power over her. She took a shaky breath. I misjudged you." Zara Collins didn't say anything. She let the words sit there, letting Miss Elise feel their weight. Then, without another word, she picked up her backpack and walked past her. The walk back to first class wasn't a victory march. It wasn't smug or arrogant. It was quiet, dignified, and somehow that made it even more powerful. The first-class passengers turned as Zara Collins entered. Some looking surprised, others quickly looking away, embarrassed that they had witnessed the earlier humiliation. And done nothing. Miss Elise followed behind, feeling smaller with every step. Zara Collins reached her seat, sat down, and calmly placed her bag beside her. She didn't thank Miss Elise. She didn't need to. Miss Elise stood there, awkwardly uncertain what to say next. "If there's anything you need," she mumbled, "please let me know." Zara Collins simply opened her book and flipped to the next page, her silence making it clear that this conversation was over. Miss Elise turned stiffly and hurried back toward the galley, her face burning with humiliation. She had never felt so exposed before, so completely stripped of authority. She had spent years making quick judgments about passengers, and it had never backfired like this. But this time, she hadn't just offended any passenger. She had humiliated the daughter of the most powerful man in the airline business. The other flight attendants in the galley exchanged glances as she entered. They had all heard about what happened, and their silence was louder than any words they could have spoken. Iris, the younger attendant who had questioned her earlier, hesitated before speaking. "Everything okay?" she asked carefully. Miss Elise shot her a sharp look, her voice tight. "It's fine, but it wasn't fine, not even close." She grabbed a tray and pretended to busy herself with arranging drinks, but her hands were trembling slightly. The reality of the situation was sinking in. The passengers had seen everything. They had watched her remove that girl from first class, and they had watched her escort her back in shame, and now she could feel their eyes on her every time she stepped into the aisle. Meanwhile, in first class, Zara Collins sat back in her seat, flipping the pages of her book. But she wasn't really reading. She could still feel the tension in the air. The same people who had ignored her earlier were now stealing glances at her, as if they had suddenly realized they were sitting next to someone important. But that wasn't what bothered her the most. What bothered her was that none of them had spoken up when it happened. She reached for her phone and checked her messages. Another text from her father had come in. "Good, now sit back and relax. I'll handle the rest." She wasn't sure what he meant by that, but she trusted him. At the front of the plane, the in-flight phone buzzed again. Miss Elise flinched at the sound. She knew who it was before she even picked it up. She lifted the receiver to her ear. "This is Miss Elise," a deep, calm voice spoke on the other end. "This is Ethan Miller." She gripped the phone tighter. His voice wasn't raised, it wasn't angry, but there was something in his tone that made the air feel heavier. "You will personally file a full incident report as soon as this flight lands. I expect a detailed explanation of why my daughter was removed from her seat despite having a valid ticket." Miss Elise swallowed hard. "Mr. Miller," she began, "you will also make sure that for the rest of this flight she receives exactly the service that every other first-class passenger gets, nothing less." "Yes, sir," she whispered. The call ended with a soft click. Miss Elise placed the phone back on the hook and leaned against the counter, her hands clammy. She had made a serious mistake, one she couldn't take back. And now she wasn't just dealing with a difficult passenger, she was dealing with the man who owned the sky she was flying in. Miss Elise stood frozen in the galley, gripping the edge of the counter. She had handled difficult situations before, but this was different. This wasn't about a minor seating mistake or a passenger being a little too demanding. This was about her making a decision, one she had been so sure of in the moment, only to realize it was based on nothing but her own assumptions. And now she was paying the price for it. Her uniform suddenly felt too tight. Her usually pristine posture slightly slumped. She could feel the glances of the other flight attendants, the unspoken judgment hanging in the air. No one said it out loud, but she could hear it in their silence. "You messed up, and now you're on your own." Taking a deep breath, she straightened up and grabbed a tray. If she was going to get through the rest of this flight, she needed to act as if nothing had happened. She stepped back into the first-class cabin, trying to maintain her usual authority, but the moment she did, she felt the shift. Passengers who had once barely acknowledged her presence now looked at her with something different. Some with quiet amusement, others with curiosity, and a few with clear disapproval. She didn't know which was worse. She forced herself to walk toward Zara Collins's seat. The girl sat comfortably now, flipping through the in-flight magazine. Her posture was calm. She wasn't gloating, and she wasn't even looking at Miss Elise, and somehow that made it worse. Miss Elise cleared her throat. "Miss Elise," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "can I offer you something to drink, maybe a snack?" Zara Collins didn't look up immediately. She turned a page slowly, then finally met the flight attendant's gaze. "A drink?" she asked in an even voice. "Yes, Miss Elise," came the quick reply. "Anything you'd like. We have fresh juice, sparkling water, tea." Zara Collins tilted her head slightly. "You didn't ask me that before," she said, still calm. "You didn't offer me anything. You didn't even greet me properly like you did with the other first-class passengers." She glanced around the cabin. "But now, you're offering." Ms. Elise felt the heat rise to her cheeks. She was used to controlling conversations, used to being the one setting the tone, but this was something entirely different. She forced a tight smile. I apologize if I wasn't as welcoming before. I assure you it wasn't intentional." Zara Collins didn't say anything for a moment. She simply watched Miss Elise, her eyes sharp yet unreadable. Then, after a pause, she gave a small shrug. "I'll have a sparkling water." Miss Elise nodded quickly, relieved to have something to do rather than just stand there under the weight of this conversation. She turned and hurried back to the galley, her hands gripping the tray a little too tightly. Iris, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "That didn't go well, did it?" Miss Elise shot her a glare. "I don't need your input right now." Iris raised her hands in surrender, but she couldn't hide the hint of satisfaction in her expression. "I'm just saying, you handled that better than you did." Miss Elise didn't respond. She quickly poured a glass of sparkling water, making sure the tray was perfect before walking back to Zara Collins's seat. She placed the glass carefully on the tray table, hoping the moment would pass without another comment. But Zara Collins wasn't done. "Thank you," she said, then paused. "By the way, I texted my dad about you." The words sent a fresh wave of dread through Miss Elise's stomach. She forced a small, tight smile. "I see." Zara Collins leaned back, watching her. "Yeah, he wasn't happy." Miss Elise already knew that. She had heard his voice on the phone not long ago, but hearing Zara Collins say it so casually, with that quiet confidence, made her stomach turn even more. "I guess we'll see what happens when we land," Zara Collins added, picking up her water and taking a slow sip. Miss Elise stiffened, nodding quickly before retreating back toward the front of the cabin. She had never wanted a flight to end so badly in her entire career, but she had a sinking feeling that her problems were only just beginning. Stepping back into the galley, Miss Elise felt an uneasy tightness in her chest. Her breath was shallow. She had thought that escorting Zara Collins back to first class would fix everything. She had thought that a forced apology, a free drink, and a little politeness would be enough to smooth things over. But the look in that girl's eyes, the calm confidence, the way she didn't need to raise her voice or argue, made it clear that this situation wasn't going away. For the first time in her long career, Miss Elise felt powerless. She had always been the one in control, the one who made the rules inside the aircraft. She decided who got upgraded, who got extra service, who was treated with priority. It had never occurred to her that one mistake could flip everything upside down. But now she could feel the weight of it pressing on her like a stone in her stomach. A quiet voice broke through her thoughts. "You're really sweating this, huh?" Miss Elise turned sharply. Iris was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, watching her with an expression that was somewhere between amusement and pity. "Mind your business," Miss Elise snapped, grabbing a napkin and pretending to busy herself. Iris smirked. "It is my business. You embarrassed that girl in front of a plane full of people. And now it turns out her dad owns the airline. I'd be sweating too if I were you, Miss Elise." She clenched her jaw. "It was an honest mistake, was it?" Iris asked, her voice dropping slightly. "Because I don't remember you questioning anyone else about their ticket, just her." Miss Elise turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. "I don't have time for this conversation." "Fine," Iris said with a shrug. "But I'd start thinking about what you're going to say when we land, because Mr. Miller, he doesn't seem like the type to let this slide." Miss Elise didn't answer. She couldn't, because she already knew Iris was right. Meanwhile, Zara Collins sat comfortably in her first-class seat, sipping her sparkling water. She wasn't enjoying the drink as much as she was enjoying the shift in energy around her. The people who had ignored her before were suddenly acknowledging her. Their glances were filled with curiosity, guilt, or quiet embarrassment. Some passengers seemed uncomfortable, shifting in their seats or pretending to be engrossed in their books. Others avoided looking at her altogether. She didn't blame them. No one had spoken up when she was being humiliated, and now they were realizing they had been bystanders. A man in the seat across from her, an older gentleman in a navy suit, leaned over slightly. I saw what happened earlier," he said hesitantly. "That was unfortunate." Zara Collins turned to look at him, raising an eyebrow. "Unfortunate?" The man cleared his throat. "Yes, well, it was clearly a mistake on the flight attendant's part." Zara Collins studied him for a moment, then gave a small smile. "A mistake," she repeated, "or a choice?" The man shifted uncomfortably, his fingers tightening around the stem of his wineglass. "Well, I suppose," he trailed off, clearly unsure of what to say. Zara Collins let the silence stretch between them for a few seconds before she turned back to her magazine, dismissing him with her indifference. She wasn't interested in making him feel better about what had happened. Her phone vibrated again. She picked it up and read the message. "Dad, we land in 45 minutes. Sit tight." She smiled slightly. "Oh, I will," she thought. Up in the cockpit, Troy was fully aware of the situation unfolding in his aircraft. He had been in the business long enough to know when something was going to turn into a scandal, and this had scandal written all over it. He reached for the in-flight phone and dialed the ground operations team. "This is Troy, Flight 372, he said smoothly. "I need confirmation on executive arrangements for a passenger upon landing." There was a pause before a voice on the other end responded, "Yes, Captain. Mr. Miller has already arranged for a private car to meet his daughter at the gate. Security has also been notified to escort a specific crew member for questioning." Troy, already knowing exactly who that crew member was, replied, "Understood. Inform the crew to prepare for immediate disembarkation procedures." "Will do, sir." Troy hung up the phone and leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. He had been flying for over 20 years and he had seen a lot. Angry passengers, entitled executives, and crew members who let their egos make bad decisions. But this was one of those rare times when he knew someone's career was about to crash harder than a failed landing. and Miss Elise had no idea how bad it was going to get. Back in first class, Miss Elise walked stiffly through the aisle, checking on passengers, but her movements lacked their usual confidence. She could feel her own crew watching her, their expressions unreadable. She had no idea what was waiting for her when they landed, but she knew one thing for sure. She had made a mistake that couldn't be undone, and the consequences were waiting for her just beyond on the runway. The plane hummed steadily as it cruised through the sky, but inside the cabin, the atmosphere had shifted completely. First-class passengers who once carried themselves with a sense of self-importance were now sitting tensely, sneaking glances at Zara Collins. The girl who had been invisible to them earlier had suddenly become the center of attention, not because she had asked for it, but because of the undeniable power she now held. Zara Collins didn't do anything dramatic. She didn't raise her voice or demand extra service. She simply existed in her seat with quiet confidence, sipping her sparkling water, scrolling through her phone, and occasionally glancing out the window. It was her presence that unsettled people. They weren't used to being held accountable for what they ignored. She was calm on the outside, but on the inside she was processing everything. She replayed the way Miss Elise had dismissed her, the way passengers had avoided eye contact, the way no one had spoken up. She thought about the way her father had responded, how he hadn't immediately reacted with anger but with controlled precision. She checked her phone again. "Dad, we land in 30 minutes. Let me know if you need anything before then." She smiled slightly. "Me? I'm good, just watching things unfold." She set the phone down and leaned back in her seat, stretching her arms slightly. The fact that Miss Elise hadn't dared to come back since delivering her drink told her everything she needed to know. The flight attendant was scrambling to figure out what to do next, and Zara Collins wasn't worried at all. Miss Elise, however, was panicking. She stood in the galley, gripping the edge of the counter so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The tension in her shoulders had built up so much that her neck ached. She had avoided going back to first class as much as possible, choosing instead to let the other attendants handle everything, but that wasn't going to save her. Iris watched her from the corner of the galley, arms crossed, with an unreadable expression on her face. She had been working under Miss Elise for a while now, and she had never seen her like this, shaken, uncertain, weak. "You should probably sit down before you collapse," Iris muttered. Miss Elise shot her a glare. "I don't need your comments right now." Iris shrugged. "Fine, but I hope you're ready for what's coming, because in about half an hour you're going to be walking off this plane, and I doubt you'll be walking back onto another one anytime soon." Miss Elise's stomach twisted. She had been trying not to think about that, but then Iris added, "Maybe they'll let you apologize again. Seems to be working so well for you." Miss Elise clenched her jaw, swallowing down the bitter lump in her throat. She wasn't stupid. She knew what was coming. She had spent years in the airline industry carefully crafting a reputation as a tough but respected senior flight attendant. She had always prided herself on being in control, on keeping things professional, but now none of that mattered. She had made a mistake that couldn't be brushed aside, and the worst part was that it wasn't just a mistake. It was a reflection of something deeper, something uglier, something she had never been forced to confront before. And now she was paying the price for it. The minutes ticked by slowly. Zara Collins could feel the descent beginning as the plane tilted slightly downward. A voice crackled over the intercom. The captain, speaking in his usual calm tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into our destination. Please make sure your seat belts are fastened and tray tables are in their upright positions. We'll be landing shortly." She reached down, buckled her seatbelt, and stole a glance toward the front of the plane. Miss Elise still hadn't returned, and at this point, Zara Collins doubted she would. Instead, she focused on what was ahead. She wasn't sure what her father had planned, but she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just going to be a private conversation. This was bigger than her, bigger than Miss Elise. This was about how people in power treated those they thought had none. And today, they had miscalculated. The plane continued its descent, the runway coming into view through the small window beside her. Zara Collins exhaled slowly, bracing for what was to come. She was ready, but she wasn't sure Miss Elise was. The descent was steady, but inside the cabin the tension grew heavier with each passing second. Zara Collins could sense it not just from the flight attendants, but from the passengers as well. The ones who had stayed silent when she was humiliated now seemed uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, suddenly too interested in their in-flight entertainment or the safety pamphlets in their seat pockets. It was strange how quickly things changed. A few hours ago, she had been invisible to them. Now they were hyper-aware of her presence, though no one dared to say a word. Ms. Elise remained out of sight, likely hiding in the galley, hoping to delay the inevitable. Zara Collins knew what was coming for her, and it wasn't going to be a private slap on the wrist. No, her father didn't believe in quiet punishments. He believed in accountability, and he made sure it was handled publicly. As the wheels of the plane finally touched the runway, a hushed stillness settled over the passengers. The usual rush of excitement when landing wasn't there. Instead, there was something else: anticipation. People weren't just ready to get off the plane, they were waiting to see what would happen next. The intercom buzzed again, and the captain's voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our destination. The local time is 3:45 p.m. Please remain seated until we reach the gate and the seatbelt sign is turned off. On behalf of our crew, thank you for flying with us today." Zara Collins glanced down at her phone and saw another text from her father. "Dad, stay seated. Security is waiting at the gate." Her lips curled into a small, knowing smile. Miss Elise, however, wasn't smiling. She stood in the galley, gripping the edge of the counter, her palms slick with sweat. Every part of her screamed to pull herself together, to walk off the plane like nothing had happened, but she knew better. She had spent years working in this industry and had never seen something escalate this quickly. This wasn't just about a complaint. It was about the owner of the airline personally making sure she was held responsible, and she had no idea what that would mean for her future. Iris stood a few feet away, watching her with an unreadable expression. She didn't say anything at first, just observed the woman who had spent years acting like she was untouchable. Then finally she spoke. "You know, if you had just treated her like every other first-class passenger, none of this would be happening right now." Miss Elise turned sharply, her eyes flashing. "I don't need a lecture." Iris shrugged. "I think you do, but it does. Doesn't matter, you'll get one soon enough." Miss Elise's stomach churned as the seatbelt sign dinged, the doors unlocked, and then everything changed. A uniformed security officer stepped onto the plane. His presence alone was enough to silence the small conversations that were happening. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with an authority that made it clear this was not a routine visit. Passengers in the first few rows stiffened their curiosity, and flight attendants stood frozen, unsure of what to do, but the officer wasn't looking for them. He was looking for one person: Miss Elise. The sound of her name sent a chill down her spine. Slowly, stiffly, she stepped forward. The officer's face was unreadable as he said, "You'll need to come with us." A few passengers audibly gasped. Others pretended not to watch, though their ears were fully tuned in. Miss Elise swallowed, forcing a tight, professional smile. "Is there a problem?" she asked. The officer didn't blink. "There have been reports of an incident regarding the removal of a first-class passenger. Mr. Miller has requested a formal review. You'll need to come with us for questioning." The moment was surreal. Miss Elise had always been the one with the authority, the one giving instructions, enforcing rules, making passengers feel small when necessary. And now she was the one being escorted off the plane. Her feet felt like lead as she walked down the aisle. The murmurs around her grew, the whispers of passengers spreading like wildfire. She avoided eye contact, but she could feel them looking at her. She had never felt so small in her life. As she reached the first-class section, she made the mistake of glancing at Zara Collins. The girl wasn't smug, she wasn't grinning or gloating. She was simply watching, calm, composed, unmoved. And that was worse. Miss Elise tore her gaze away and kept walking as she stepped off the plane. The weight of everything truly settled in. She had lost control, lost her position, lost the respect she had always commanded, and now she had to face the consequences for the first time. She wasn't sure if she was ready. The moment Miss Elise stepped off the plane, the bright lights of the terminal felt like a spotlight shining directly on her. The security officers led her through the jet bridge, their pace steady but firm. She could feel the weight of every step and the murmurs of airport staff and passengers growing louder as people turned to watch. She had walked through this airport countless times, always with confidence, always in control. But now she felt exposed, like a criminal being paraded through the crowd. At the end of the jet bridge, two airline executives stood waiting, their expressions unreadable, their arms crossed in silent judgment. One of them, a tall man with silver hair and a sharp suit, stepped forward. "Miss Elise," he said in a cool but professional voice, "come with us." She swallowed hard, nodding stiffly. The officers stepped aside, allowing the executives to take over. She followed them through a restricted door leading into the private corridors of the airport. The area's regular passengers never saw these walls. They were sterile, and the air was thick with the smell of coffee and jet fuel. Finally, they reached a small conference room. Inside, a long table stretched across the center with a few chairs neatly arranged. The walls were bare except for the airline's logo printed behind the head seat. One of the executives gestured toward a chair. "Sit." Miss Elise hesitated for a split second before obeying. The silver-hailed man took the seat across from her, clasping his hands together. His name tag read Calvin York, Senior Operations Manager. She had met him once before, in passing, but now he looked at her with nothing but cold scrutiny. "You do realize why you're here, correct?" he asked. Miss Elise straightened in her seat, trying to regain whatever authority she had left. "I was informed there was a complaint about a seating issue." "Seating issue?" Calvin York repeated, his voice carrying a slight edge. "Miss Elise, do you understand who you removed from first class?" She forced herself to hold his gaze. "I do." "Now, do you?" Calvin York tilted his head slightly. "Because this isn't just about a mistake. This is about how that mistake happened." Miss Elise's fingers curled around the arms of the chair. "I didn't mean..." "You didn't mean to humiliate the daughter of the airline's owner," Calvin York interrupted. "Or you didn't mean to assume she didn't belong in first class." Her throat tightened as silence stretched between them. Calvin York leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "Let's be clear, Miss Elise. This is not about a simple seating mix-up. If it were, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. This is about why you questioned her ticket when you didn't question anyone else's. This is about why you spoke to her in a tone you wouldn't have used on another passenger." Ms. Elise's jaw clenched. I was just following protocol." Calvin York scoffed, shaking his head. "No, you weren't. Protocol requires that if there's an issue with seating, you check the manifest first. You didn't do that, did you, Miss Elise?" She stayed silent. "You also didn't radio the gate agent to verify the ticket," he continued. "You made a decision based purely on assumption, and then, to make matters worse, you spoke down to a minor in front of the entire first-class cabin." Miss Elise felt heat rise to her cheeks. She wanted to defend herself, to say that it wasn't that serious, that it wasn't intentional, but how could she argue when the evidence was stacked against her? Calvin York exhaled through his nose, leaning back in his chair. "You've been with this airline for how long?" 10 years, she answered quietly. 10 years, he repeated. "That's a long time. Long enough to know how things work. Long enough to know better." His words hit harder than she expected. Calvin York pulled out a folder and flipped it open. Inside were documents, statements from passengers, a report from the captain, and, worst of all, a printed complaint directly from Ethan Miller himself. Calvin York tapped the paper with 2 fingers. "Mr. Miller has already made it clear that this incident will not be ignored." Miss Elise's breath hitched. "What do that mean?" "It means," Calvin York said evenly, "that as of now, you are suspended without pay pending a full review by the board." Her stomach dropped. "Suspended?" "Yes," his tone remained cold. "A final decision will be made within the week, but I wouldn't be optimistic if I were you." Miss Elise's hands trembled slightly. "I've given 10 years to this airline. You can't just—" Calvin York's eyes darkened. "Miss Elise, if this were any other passenger, we'd still be having this conversation. The only difference is it wouldn't be just suspension, it would be immediate termination." Her mouth opened, then closed. Calvin York sighed, rubbing his temple. "I'm going to be honest with you. You might have a chance to appeal if you take full accountability, if you admit your mistake and show that you're willing to learn from it. But if you sit here making excuses and defending yourself, then this is the end of your career in aviation." Miss Elise swallowed hard. She had spent years building her reputation, climbing the ranks, thinking she was untouchable. But now, everything she had worked for was hanging by a thread. Calvin York studied her for a moment before closing the folder. "That's all for now. You'll be escorted out of the airport. A formal letter will be sent to your email by tomorrow." He stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. Miss Elise still stood frozen in shock. Slowly she rose from her seat. Her knees felt weak. She wanted to argue, to demand another chance, but she knew it wouldn't matter. A security officer stepped back into the room, waiting to escort her out. As she turned to leave, Calvin York spoke one last time. "Maybe next time, before you judge someone by how they look," he said coolly, "you'll think twice." Miss Elise didn't reply. She walked out of the room, her head low and her stomach twisted in knots. For the first time in 10 years, she had no idea what her future looked like. Miss Elise walked through the airport terminal in a daze, each step feeling heavier than the last. The security officer at her side didn't speak or offer any words of comfort or reassurance. There was nothing to say. She had heard her fate loud and clear, and the reality of it was settling in like a lead weight in her chest, suspended without pay. Her hands clenched into fists as she navigated through the terminal, ignoring the stares from passing employees and travelers. Some people had already heard what happened. News like this traveled fast in the airline industry, especially when it involved someone as powerful as Ethan Miller. She had always walked through these halls with a sense of authority, head held high, her uniform pristine. But now she felt like an outsider. When she reached the exit doors, she hesitated. The airport was her second home. She had spent years inside these walls, working tirelessly to make sure flights ran smoothly and ensuring passengers followed the rules. But now, she was the one being removed like a problem that needed to be handled. She wasn't ready for this. The security officer cleared his throat, gesturing toward the exit without another word. She stepped outside, the cool air hitting her skin as the doors slid shut behind her. The noise of the city filled her ears. Honking cars, distant chatter, the hum of planes overhead. She had never felt more alone. Inside the airport, things were moving quickly. Zara Collins sat in the first-class lounge, her posture relaxed but her mind sharp. She had been escorted there shortly after the plane landed, at her father's request. The lounge was quiet and elegant, filled with plush leather chairs and warm lighting. A few passengers were scattered around, sipping coffee and checking their phones, oblivious to the storm that had just passed through the terminal. She wasn't waiting long. A few minutes later, the glass doors slid open and in walked the man she had been waiting for. Ethan Miller carried himself with the same quiet authority he always had. Tall, well-dressed. His presence alone commanded respect. He was a man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. His words carried weight simply because of who he was. As he approached, Zara Collins stood with a small smile tugging at her lips. "Hey, Dad," she said. He gave her a long look, then sighed, pulling her into a brief but firm hug. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I'm good," he replied, pulling back and studying her face to make sure she wasn't just saying that to make him feel better. "They didn't mess with you after you went back to first class?" she asked. He smirked. "Nope, I think they were too scared." Ethan Miller exhaled, shaking his head. They both sat down, the tension in the air finally beginning to ease. Folding his hands in front of him, he said, "Tell me everything." Zara Collins recounted the entire story. The moment Miss Elise approached her, the way she had dismissed her ticket, the humiliation of being forced to move. She kept her tone even, never exaggerating, never making it more dramatic than it needed to be. Her father listened intently, his expression unreadable. He didn't interrupt or react with sudden anger, but Zara Collins knew him well enough to see the fire burning behind his eyes. When she finished, he sat in silence for a long moment, then finally spoke. "She's suspended," he said simply, "indefinitely." Zara Collins raised an eyebrow. "Just suspended?" He met her gaze for a moment, and she considered that he was giving her a chance to explain herself. He nodded. "I believe in accountability, but I also believe in fairness. She needs to own up to what she did. If she does, then maybe she can fix herself. If she doesn't, then she won't work for this airline ever again." Zara Collins leaned back in her chair, processing that. "Do you think she will own up to it?" Ethan Miller exhaled, rubbing his chin. Some people don't learn until they lose everything. She thought about Miss Elise's face when she had come to apologize, the tension in her voice, the way she had tried to brush it off as a misunderstanding. It wasn't, it was a choice, a bad one. "She won't get her job back," Zara Collins said confidently. "People like her never admit they were wrong." Ethan Miller gave a small, thoughtful nod. "We'll see." He glanced at his watch. "I have a meeting with the board in an hour. We're going to implement new policies because of this." Zara Collins raised an eyebrow. "New policies?" Her father nodded. "Bias training, more oversight on first-class treatment, and a stronger system for passengers to report discrimination. This isn't just about you," he said. "It's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Zara Collins felt a strange sense of pride settle in her chest. This wasn't just about punishing Ms. Elise. It was about change. She picked up her drink, taking a slow sip. "So basically, you just helped make the airline better," she observed. Ethan Miller chuckled, shaking his head. "Ironic, isn't it?" Zara Collins smirked. "Karma's funny like that." Her father's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then sighed. "They're ready for me." He stood up, adjusting his suit. "You coming with me or heading home?" Zara Collins stretched, standing as well. "I think I'll stick around. I want to see what happens next." Ethan Miller smiled. "That's my girl." They walked out of the lounge together, side by side, the weight of the day settling behind them. But for Miss Elise, her storm was just beginning. Ms. Elise sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the airline-issued tablet that still rested on her nightstand. The same tablet she had used for years to check passenger lists, seating charts, and company memos. Now it was useless to her. She had been locked out of the system the moment her suspension was finalized. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers twitching slightly as she tried to process everything. 10 years. 10 years of early morning flights, late night layovers, missed holidays, and endless hours in the sky. 10 years of controlling the cabin, enforcing rules, making sure everything ran her way. And now, it had taken less than 10 minutes to destroy all of it. She glanced at her phone. Her email was still open. The official suspension letter had arrived just moments ago. Cold and impersonal subject. Suspension notification from Airline Executive Board. Dear Miss Elise, effective immediately, you are placed on unpaid suspension pending a formal review regarding conduct on Flight 3272D. A disciplinary hearing will be scheduled, and you will be notified of further actions. Until further notice, you are prohibited from accessing airline facilities or performing duties in any capacity. Failure to comply with these conditions may result in immediate termination. Further instructions will be provided within 72 hours. Regards, Airline Executive Board. Miss Elise exhaled sharply, her grip tightening around the phone. This isn't happening, she thought, but it is. And the worst part was that she had no one to blame but herself. For the first few hours after leaving the airport, she had been angry, furious at the way she had been treated, embarrassed by how quickly things had spiraled out of her control. But now, sitting alone in her small apartment, the anger had started to shift. For the first time since the flight, she allowed herself to really think about what had happened. Not the punishment, not the fallout, just the moment itself. The moment she had looked at that girl, Zara Collins, and assumed without hesitation that she didn't belong. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And now it was costing her everything. A lump formed in her throat. She reached for a glass of water on the nightstand, but her hands were unsteady. She set it back down before it could spill. She could fight it. She could argue, claiming she had just been doing her job, but deep down she knew no matter how much she tried to justify it, she had done something that wasn't just unprofessional, it was wrong. And Ethan Miller had made sure she wouldn't get away with it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden buzz from her phone. A new email notification popped up on her screen. Her stomach twisted when she saw the sender. Ethan Miller. For a moment, she just stared at it, unsure if she had the courage to open it. Her thumb hovered over the screen before finally tapping the message. Subject: accountability. Miss Elise, I'm sure by now you understand the severity of what happened on Flight 372. I won't waste time repeating what's already been made clear by the board. However, I believe in people taking responsibility for their actions, and that includes giving them a chance to acknowledge their mistakes. I am giving you that chance now. If you wish to formally apologize to my daughter, I will make sure she receives your message. However, I want to be clear. This apology isn't for me, it isn't for the airline, it isn't for your career. It is for the person you wronged. If you can't bring yourself to do that, then I see no reason for this conversation to continue. I'll wait for your response. Ethan Miller. Ms. Elise let out a slow breath as she reread the email. A part of her wanted to delete it, ignore it, walk away from this whole mess and blame it on anyone but herself. But another part of her, one she wasn't used to listening to, told her that this was her only shot at salvaging even a fraction of her dignity. She hesitated for a long time before finally pressing reply. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then slowly she began to type. Subject: re-accountability. Mr. Miller, I don't expect forgiveness, and I won't make excuses. I made a terrible mistake. I didn't just misjudge your daughter. I disrespected her, and worse, I didn't realize it until it was too late. I have spent the last 10 years enforcing rules, thinking I was doing my job the right way. But now I understand that I let my personal bias influence my actions, whether I intended it or not. That is something I will have to live with. I would like the opportunity to apologize to Zara Collins directly, but I understand that is entirely her choice. If she doesn't want to hear from me, I accept that. No matter what happens next, I will take full responsibility for my actions. I am sorry. Miss Elise. She stared at the message for a long time before finally pressing send. As soon as it left her inbox, she set her phone down and leaned back, closing her eyes for the first time in days. She felt something shift. The storm wasn't over, but maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward making things right. Meanwhile, Zara Collins sat in her father's office, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone while waiting for him to finish his call. She had spent the past few days watching the fallout of what had happened on Flight 372, seeing articles pop up online about airline discrimination, discussions on social media, and even a few industry experts weighing in on what changes needed to be made. She wasn't surprised. Her father had a reputation for handling things with precision. When something went wrong in his company, he didn't just fix it, he changed the system so it wouldn't happen again. And this time, that meant major policy changes, mandatory bias training, increased oversight in first-class treatment. The airline wasn't just apologizing, it was evolving. And it was all because of one flight, one moment, one bad decision from a woman who had let her assumptions control her actions. Her phone buzzed with a new email notification. Zara Collins glanced at the sender, her eyebrows lifting slightly when she saw it was from Miss Elise. For a moment, she just stared at it. She wasn't sure how she felt about hearing from the woman who had humiliated her, but curiosity got the better of her, and she opened the message. Subject: my apology. Zara Collins, I know I don't deserve your time and I won't waste it with excuses. You didn't deserve what I did to you. You weren't wrong. You weren't out of place when I told you to move. I wasn't thinking about rules or policies. I was thinking about what I expected to see in first class. And when I didn't see it, I acted without thought. That wasn't just unprofessional, it was unfair, and I am deeply ashamed of that. I can't change what I did, but I can promise that I will never let myself make a mistake like that again. And if you're willing to accept it, I want to apologize to you directly in person. If not, I understand either way. I just wanted you to know that I do see my mistake now, and I am truly sorry, Miss Elise. Zara Collins read the email twice, her lips pressing together as she considered the words. She didn't expect an apology, not a real one. She had seen people apologize before, not because they meant it, but because they had to. But this felt different. It wasn't defensive, it wasn't begging for forgiveness, it wasn't trying to shift blame, it was honest. And that surprised her. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her fingers against the armrest, debating whether or not she even wanted to respond. She didn't need an apology, she had already won. The system was changing, the conversation was happening, and Miss Elise had already faced her consequences. But something in her gut told her that ignoring the email would be too easy. She glanced at her father, who had just ended his call and was now watching her with a raised eyebrow. "What's that look for?" he asked. Zara Collins tilted the phone toward him so he could read the message. His expression didn't change much as he scanned it, but when he finished, he leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and thought, "She didn't have to send that." "No," he finally said. Zara Collins agreed, and she didn't send it. He studied her. "What do you want to do?" Zara Collins sighed, considering her options. She could ignore it, walk away knowing that Ms. Elise would probably never make this mistake again. That would be easy. Or she could answer, not because Ms. Elise deserved it, but because growth was something worth acknowledging. She exhaled sharply, then quickly typed a response. Subject, Re. My apology. Miss Elise, I appreciate your email. I'm not angry anymore, but I hope you understand that this isn't just about me. There are other people who have been in my situation, who never got justice, who never had a voice. I was lucky that my father could make things right, but not everyone has that privilege. You say you won't make this mistake again. I hope that's true, because I'm not interested in whether or not you're sorry. I'm interested in whether or not you change. I won't meet with you, but I do accept your apology. Not because you deserve it, but because I believe people can learn from their mistakes. Zara Collins. She hit send. Her father watched her closely as she put her phone down. That was a good response, he said with a shrug. I wasn't going to let her off easy, he smirked. That's my girl. A few minutes later, his assistant poked her head into the office. Mr. Miller, the board is ready for you, he said, standing and adjusting his suit. You sure you don't want to come in? Zara Collins shook her head. Nah, I've done my part, she chuckled. Yes, you have, he replied. As he left, Zara Collins sat back in her chair, feeling an unexpected sense of peace. She hadn't expected this situation to unfold the way it had. She hadn't expected to be at the center of something so much bigger than herself. But now, as she looked out the office window at the busy city below, she realized something. This wasn't just about one flight. It was about the way people were treated, the way assumptions shaped reality, the way power was used and misused. Miss Elise had misjudged her, had humiliated her, but in the end she was the one who had to live with the consequences, and Zara Collins would keep walking forward, head held high, knowing that she hadn't just been a victim in this story, she had been a force of change, and that was better than any apology. In this story, we learn a powerful lesson about not judging others by their appearance or by our own preconceived ideas. The flight attendant's disrespect not only hurt the passenger deeply, but also ended up ruining her own career. It clearly shows that when power is misused without fairness and respect, it leads to a breakdown in trust and sparks conflict. This incident reminds us to look inward, to reflect on our own actions, and to take responsibility for our mistakes. When we admit our faults and work to fix them, positive changes can occur that improve our workplace and our society. Patience, respect, and honest self-reflection are the keys to building a community where everyone is treated equally. Instead of shifting blame onto others, we should learn from our errors and make a genuine effort to change. Ultimately, the story teaches us that our actions have consequences, and that personal growth comes from owning up to our mistakes and using them as an opportunity to become better people. This lesson encourages us to strive for continuous self-improvement every day. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one.